Kochani, rozpoczęłam troszeczkę wcześniej, żeby przedstawić Wam dr Terry Wahls, chociaż wydaje mi się, że bardzo wiele osób ją kojarzy, bardzo wiele osób ją zna. Doktor już dołączyła do nas. Ja pozwolę sobie krótko przedstawić dr Terry Wahls. Jest certyfikowanym lekarzem Instytutu Medycyny Funkcjonalnej i profesorem klinicznym na Uniwersytecie Iowa, gdzie prowadzi głównie badania kliniczne właśnie w obszarze stwardnienia rozsianego. Jest również pacjentką z wtórnie postępującą postacią stwardnienia rozsianego, które niestety przykują do wózka na aż 4 lata. Był to taki wózek z pochyleniem i odchyleniem do pozycji leżącej. Wtedy też dr Terry Wahls po rozpoczęciu badań nad tym, jak dieta i jak żywienie może wpłynąć na nasze zdrowie, na głównie wtedy jeszcze jej zdrowie, opracowała specjalny protokół, który przywrócił jej, można powiedzieć, zdrowie i teraz codziennie pedałuje na rowerze do pracy. Także jest autorką oczywiście Wahls Protocol, jest autorką tej książki, czyli po angielsku Wahls Protocol, ale po polsku Fenomenalna kuracja. Jest to książka, która była takim kamieniem milowym również w moim zdrowieniu. I prowadzi badania kliniczne, które jakby sprawdzają wpływ interwencji żywieniowych i stylu życia na leczenie właśnie stwardnienia rozsianego. Także ja już Panią doktor, kochani, zapraszam.
Okay. Hey, how are you?
Okay. You can't believe it. You can't believe it. I'm going to cry. Really.
Oh no tears.
It's unbelievable, really, because I remember 9 years ago, you know, when I found your book, and it was a huge, oh my God, I didn't realize that I'm going to react like that. Sorry, but it's an honor for me, you know, to have you today.
Oh, thank you. You know, I am thrilled to have this chance to speak to your audience, and I apologize. I only got a few of the words you were telling to all of your audience. Every now and then, like, okay, I can recognize that one. That's probably talking about me now. So,
you know, I was nervous all day because, you know, it is really indeed the milestone in my own story, and now I can talk to you, and it's incredible, but I didn't realize that I'm going to cry. So sorry. I'm not going to waste your time anymore, but my audience know you because I introduce you, and I know your story very well. I know that you will struggle with SM, but I would like you to tell us something about your story, about your history of
sure.
Your struggling.
You know, so during medical school, I started having some electrical twinges that would become more frequent and more severe. And there were no treatments that were effective at stopping them. And then 20 years later, in 2000, I developed weakness in my left leg. I see my neurologist who says, you know, this could be bad or really, really bad, and begins doing all of the tests. And 3 weeks later, I hear multiple sclerosis. Now, I do my research. I find the very best physicians for the MS clinics here in the United States and probably in the world. And I take the newest drugs. And I continue to worsen. 3 years later, I hear tilt recline wheelchair. And my face pains continue to relentlessly worsen. My 10-year-old daughter hugs me as tears stream down my face. And I ask myself, you know, am I really doing all that I can? You know, because I'm still mentally clear. So I go back to reading the basic science, and I started reading about the animal models of multiple sclerosis, of Huntington's, of Parkinson's, of ALS, of Alzheimer's. And I see that mitochondrial dysfunction, at least in my mind, is the big driver of disability. And I eventually create a supplement cocktail for my mitochondria that slows my decline. I'm super grateful. I discovered a study using electrical stimulation of muscles in people who are paralyzed. I convinced my physical therapist to let me have a test session. It hurts really bad, but when it's over, I feel great. And we add electrical stimulation of muscles to my physical therapy. And then I discover the Institute for Functional Medicine, and I take their course on neuroprotection. And I have a longer list of supplements. And then I have a big aha. And you know, actually it's embarrassing now to think of how long it took to have this aha. Like, what if I redesign my paleo diet that I've followed now for 5 years based on this list of supplements that I'm taking? And so that's a few more months of research. And I now have this long list of foods that I'm emphasizing. And I start this new way of eating December 26, 2007. Now, for everyone in your audience, I want you all to understand that at that point, I'm so weak I cannot sit up in a regular chair. I'm in a zero gravity chair with my knees higher than my nose, and that's how I staff the residents in resident clinic. That's how I eat meals with my family. I can't go to movies or go out to anywhere because I can't sit up anymore. I can walk a few steps using 2 walking sticks. I still use my hands. I'm beginning to have some brain fog. My electrical face pain is much more severe, much more difficult to deal with. And it's very clear to me that I'm on track to become bedridden by my illness, demented by my illness, and I will probably have my face pain turn on and not be able to turn it off. And when it's on, a breeze triggers the pain, swallowing triggers the pain, talking triggers the pain. And so once it's on, when I try to talk, it'll sound a bit like this. I can just get just a little vocalization out, and the spasms come, and I have the jerky in my face. It's horrible for my family to watch, and of course, horrible to endure. And so I start this new way of eating. And by the middle of January, so about 3 weeks into this, I realized that my mental clarity is improving, my energy is improving, and my physical therapist says, Terry, you're getting stronger. And he advances my exercises. I can now do my little mat exercises 10 minutes twice a day. And in the following month, in February, I walk using 2 walking sticks in the hallways at my hospital, stunning my colleagues. I asked my family to move the chair to the table because I want to sit in a regular chair to have my meal with my family. First time in many years. And then I start walking with 1 walking stick and then with no walking sticks. And then on Mother's Day, which is in May, we have an emergency family meeting because I want to try riding my bike. And so Jackie decides, and she's my wife, that, okay, we can try. She tells my big 6'5", 16-year-old son, Zach, you run alongside on the left. She tells my daughter, Zebby, you run alongside on the right, and she'll follow. We all get into position, and I get on my bike, and I bike around the block. And that big 16-year-old boy, he's crying. The 13-year-old girl, she's crying. Jackie's crying.
I can imagine it.
And when I tell that story now, I still cry, because that's when I understood the current understanding of secondary progressive multiple sclerosis is incomplete. And who knows how much recovery might be possible. And I ride my bike a little bit more every day. And then in October, Jackie says, let's sign you up for the Courage Ride. It's 18.5 miles. However far you can go, honey, it will be great. And so, you know, I start and I have to take a couple of breaks, but I finish. I cross that finish line once again. You know, my kids are crying, Jackie's crying, I'm crying. And this fundamentally changes the way I think about disease and health. Forgive me, my nose is running here a bit. And it changes how I practice medicine, and it will change the focus of my research. And I have made it my mission to teach the public that, yes, there's stuff that you can do. And that, yes, if I can come back from being unable to sit up, having profound fatigue, beginning to have brain fog, having truly horrific levels of pain, to, you know, a rich and full life, to, you know, going out jogging this morning, then there is hope for you. Absolutely, there's hope for you.
Yes, exactly. And it's incredible because, you know, I had the same story. I mean, I was home-bounded for many years and I couldn't walk. I couldn't almost do anything, you know, because I couldn't even digest properly. So I couldn't. So when I found your book and I started to try your protocol, I was a vegetarian for many years, you know, and I was a lot of, yeah, I wanted to ask you about it because I was a vegetarian for many years because I thought maybe it wasn't my choice because I didn't want to kill animals, but I thought that it is better life for our planet, for better life for me as well. And my goal was to be healthy. I didn't know that meat is healthy. And I thought that meat is very acidic. It's not healthy for our body to eat a lot of meat every day. So when I start your protocol, I had a lot of digestion problem, and I couldn't eat almost anything. I had a problem with water, you know. I started with kiwi, really. I started with kiwi because I couldn't eat anything. So please tell us, Terry, if I can say like that, because I remember that I read about your story, that you mentioned about it, that you also been some kind of vegetarian and you didn't eat a lot of meat. Yes?
Yeah, for 20 years, I was not eating. You know, I grew up on a farm. When I became a vegetarian, my parent farmer said, "You're ruining your health. You need meat." It just made the young me more resistant, and I dug in, and I was determined to not eat meat. And when my neurologist introduced me to the work of Lauren Credane, I read his books and his papers and decided that there was a scientific rationale. And I went back to eating meat. I started with broths and bone broth, and it took me about 6 months to get meat back into my diet and to tolerate that well. And, you know, the next year I needed the wheelchair, so it wasn't turning things around. And yet I thought, who knows how long it takes for my body to rebuild my brain and my spinal cord, in that, you know, it takes about 7 years to replace everything in your spinal cord and your brain. Like, okay, maybe it takes 7 years, so at least I'm doing something. So I stayed with it. You know, I'm adding the supplements. I stayed with that. And I want all of your listeners to keep in mind that you and I were all alive because life is self-correcting biochemistry that keeps everything within safety parameters, so our potassium's at the correct level in our cells, in our bloodstream, our sodium's at the correct level in our cells, in our bloodstream, and the calcium, and the various vitamins and minerals. And our DNA has the instructions to rebuild and repair our cells, including our brain, our mitochondria, and our cells. We have to see to it that we have the building blocks. And for many of us, our diets are so poor that we have been relentlessly depleting the biochemical bank account that we use to run the chemistry of life. And so that's what having a diet with maximal nutrition can do, is slowly make more deposits into that biochemical bank account than we're withdrawing every day. And if you do that slowly, you will begin doing more of life's chemistry correctly. You'll begin making proteins in your cells correctly, and you'll begin that slow process of repair. And then, the more we can do in terms of better sleep, gentle exercise, meditation, mindfulness, we can begin to rebalance our hormone signaling. And we can, in the setting of really great nutrition, begin improving how we're doing the chemistry of life, and begin reducing our symptoms. I focus on helping my tribe, my followers, improve their cellular health. And then as their physician, if they're my patient, we monitor their blood pressure, their blood sugar, their medication use, because often blood pressure improves, blood sugar improves, and I'm happy that I get to reduce their prescription medications, the doses, bit by bit, and then we can begin to eliminate the medications, medication by medication. It's a process. It may take several months, it may take several years. But as people improve their cellular health, symptoms will often reduce, and function will often improve.
So you've told us that it took 7 months or 6 or 7 months to introduce meat to your diet to
Correct.
digest properly. So could you give us some tips, or I know that exist some supplements that we can add to our diet to improve our digestion, because at the beginning it can be really crucial.
It can be
Yes.
really, it can be super hard, and so for many, particularly if you've been a vegetarian for a long time, you may have decreased your ability to make stomach acid. Stomach acid is necessary for digesting proteins. And so you may need to take a supplement to support the production of stomach acid. For some people, we can do that by taking apple cider vinegar. There are some supplements that will boost your stomach acid, such as betaine. In addition, digestive enzymes may be helpful, and there are a variety of digestive enzymes that are out there. But often the addition of digestive enzymes and the betaine can really help with stomach acid and with digestion of the protein. So that's one strategy. Another strategy that I think is super helpful is bone broth, gelatins and collagens. I found it to be very helpful to make bone broth with, I'd get chicken feet and chicken carcasses, I'd make chicken soup, straight out the carcass, straight out the chicken feet. And the broths just themselves were delicious. They were very well digested, easily tolerated.
Mhm.
And even my vegetarians who are having a hard time eating meat find that these broths, one, they generally like the flavor because they're fairly mild. It's just very delicious.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
I
bone
love
broth properties are so super. I'm a GAPS coach, so for me, the GAPS protocol and mostly the bone broth was the most important part in my story, you know, because I couldn't digest meat at the beginning, so I start with a very small amount of bone broth, and it started to healing my my stomach and my whole digestive tract. So it helps me a lot with my recovery as
it is
well.
super helpful, and you can just sip on it like you would tea throughout the day. And I loved making, chicken broths. I love making beef and bison stock. I also would get the fish carcasses and fish heads and make fish stock as well. So all of those broths are super good for you. Start with a small amount and gradually increase. And ideally, you can have several cups a day. Now, during the winter, I love making soups and stews. That's a big part of our meal plan during all of the winter. I'll still make some during the summer. Today, as a matter of fact, we're having collards in greens. So we made bone broth overnight. I strained out the bones and then added chopped lamb, onion, and the collards. And that will be tonight's meal. And then I'll can it, so I'll have a couple more jars in the refrigerator to have next week as well. Because well, I love cooking. I like even more to cook once and get 3 meals. So that I have cooked today. So I did all my bone broth overnight, chopped everything up this morning, put it back in the slow cooker. We'll eat it tonight. I'll can up 2 more quarts that we'll be able to have them for next week. And that makes it much easier for us to manage cooking if you can take that sort of principle. As I cook once, but I try to have at least 2 meals, preferably 3, so I don't have to. Okay.
I would like to ask, because I read your book and I know that you mentioned about ketosis, but it's not the most important part of the book. Did you check your level of ketones during your story, or it was just
So during my recovery, I was basically doing probably what many of your listeners would know as Wahls level 2. So
yeah,
it was paleo. I was doing organ meat. I'm doing some seaweed, and I'm doing a lot of fermented foods. I would intermittently, and that's when I was biking and just having this amazing recovery journey. And then I decided that, well, what would ketosis do? And then I did about 18 months of very much ketogenic eating, and that was great. And then I could tell, like, okay, I wonder, would I do better being in ketosis for a few days, and then coming out of ketosis?
Okay, to switch to carbs.
Right. So I would call it more of going between being the ketogenic and then level 2, more paleo.
Okay.
And the reason I think this is probably better, and this is my preference for the vast majority of my patients, is our ancestors. I had to do a whole lot of work to get enough food to eat. And they were in ketosis on the basis of all of that exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't because they had a high-fat diet. They were maybe using some of their used up all of their stored glycogen as they were doing their work to get their food. And then they're burning fat. And then they get back with their food. And the compact with the clan is the women prepared the food, the men ate first, then we got to eat. And we had a couple days of plentiful food. Now, it was higher protein, a lot of leaves, a few tubers, and a fair amount of dirt.
Okay. So do you use in your patient, for example, if you have a patient with cancer, do you use therapeutical ketosis?
So if someone has seizures, I may leave them in ketosis permanently, and then we'll monitor ketones. If they're going through cancer treatment, I'll put them in ketosis, and we'll monitor their ketones. And I want them in ketosis until they're in cancer remission. And then I would put them on a moderate carb, and we can discuss what their diet's going to be like. But they don't need to be in ketosis permanently.
Okay.
And if someone has autoimmunity, then my preference is that I want them to go into a ketosis lower carb diet for perhaps a week, 3 days, 5 days, then a higher protein diet, moderate carbs for perhaps a week. They go back and forth between the two because that's closer to what our evolutionary history looks like. And I can do that for the rest of their life.
Okay.
We don't have any long-term data that tells me that I can safely tell you to be in ketosis the rest of your life.
So it depends on situation and what sort of condition the patient has.
Correct.
Yeah?
Correct.
Okay.
So
Can I ask you about because in your story, for sure you had a lot of drugs and medical.
Yes.
You know, it was normal, you know, and some people, I think that mostly people who takes a lot of drugs in their story, they are afraid that it's not possible to recover because they took already a lot of drugs, a lot of treatments, a lot of medical history, and they are afraid that even if they change the diet, even if they change the way of life, that it's not possible to recover. And that's why I think that's why they stay in this kind of state that I'm not going to do anything because it's not going to help me. What do you think about it? Because you took a lot of
So I treat my disease very aggressively. I took very aggressive drugs, and I was happy to take them because I could still use my hands. I wanted to keep what function I had as long as possible. I think the bigger reason people don't change their diet or lifestyle is they're addicted to sugar, they're addicted to processed foods, they're addicted to their gaming, they're addicted to social media, they're addicted to sedentary behavior. And our big food industry, our technology industries have hired really smart scientists to design foods that are addicting, to design computer games and social media that is addicting. And we get a lot of pleasure from that food. We get a lot of pleasure from sitting on our butt all day. We get a lot of pleasure from the social media. And when we stop those things, we'll have craving, we'll have some irritability, and it is like, if I go back to the sugar, it relieves the craving and it gives me immediate pleasure. If I go back to the social media, it gives me immediate pleasure and it relieves the craving. That's why people don't want to do that stuff. I want to keep my addictions and take drugs that allow me to continue my addiction. And for everyone who's listening, what I want you to think about is you probably know people that you care about and you love who are addicted to bad compounds, substance abuse compounds, narcotics, amphetamines, cocaine, alcohol, tobacco. You know it's destroying their health. The person you love may know it's destroying their health, but they cannot overcome their addiction. But you still love them because they're your mom, your dad, your spouse, your brother, and so you're still going to keep them in your life. And they finally try to deal with their addiction, and you want to support them. So, of course, you're going to try and be very helpful, but you would not bring them tobacco, you would not bring them alcohol, you would not bring them cocaine. You would be trying to get them, you know, clean food, good company that's away from the addictive compounds. And that's what all of us are trying to do, is like, we're trying to have the best diet and lifestyle and surround ourselves with people who will support that journey and stay away from people who will sabotage us.
Yeah, that's true, and it's really hard when we have our own story and we have a lot of friends, you know, near us, and they tell us, no, why are you doing this? Look at him, he's eating McDonald's and he's doing fine, so why you are going to change your diet?
Why are you giving up all that pleasure? And so you're going to get a lot of people criticizing. My only suggestion is have hope. Know that there are things that you can do. And I'd encourage you to think about what are the domains you'd like to work on first. Mm-hmm. Is it stress reduction? Is it exercise? Is it improving your sleep? Is it improving your diet? And if you're going to work on your diet, often it's easiest to start with doing the things to add first. And as you add in more of these really good foods, you're going to reduce the foods that are harmful, and then eventually eliminate the ones that are really harmful. And I don't know how rapidly your transformation will occur. Nor can I know how completely the transformation will occur.
Yeah, but you said very, very smart thing, that if you want to change something, you have to add a lot of good things to put on the side the bad one. Because if you only you know, just get rid of gluten, get rid of alcohol and this and that and the other stuff, you are going to think that you are so a poor man or a woman, that you are not going to have anything else in your life. And I see in my patient that they Justina, what am I going to eat? I'm not going to eat anything because you took me everything from my life. So sugar, alcohol, bread, pasta. So what am I going to eat?
This is
yeah, it's nothing.
So you know, in my clinics at the VA, where we're seeing people who have, you know, severe disability, very limited money, I would first say, let's try a goal of getting 9 cups, so 3 platefuls of vegetables in before you have any of these harmful foods. So the first week is get 1 plateful of vegetables in a day. Okay, they get that down. Then the next week, let's try to get 2 platefuls of vegetables in. And then on the 3rd week, now we try to get 3 plates of vegetables. And I explain that as you're adding more vegetables, you're going to have to reduce some of the breads, pastas, and bread, so you have room for your vegetables. And we haven't said they can't have them. It's just that you're gonna have one plate full of vegetables, then 2 plates full of vegetables, then 3 platefuls of vegetables. Then they come back in like, God, there's no room for the pasta or bread anymore because I've eaten all these vegetables, Doc. And I smiled. So yeah, that's the point. I'm trying, because I don't want you to be hungry. I want you to be filled with foods that are really good for you. And that becomes much, much easier. And I saw someone saying, oh, like, oh my God, I love pasta. You know,
I used to love
pasta.
it either.
I love pasta, I love bread, I love cheese, but you know what? I love jogging more.
And I love to live more.
And you know, I'm super fortunate in that I have trigeminal neuralgia. It is, if any of you have broken bones, this hurts more than a broken bone. If you've had surgery, this hurts more than surgery. If you've had a baby, active baby, labor pains, this hurts way more than that. And so I also know that if I have gluten, dairy, or eggs, it turns on my trigeminal neuralgia. Mm-hmm. And it is just a horrific level of pain. So that's made it very easy for me to not eat those things. Now, it is true, there are gluten-free versions of breads and pastas. So in the beginning, for many folks, having some gluten-free options or dairy-free options for familiar foods makes the transition much easier. Absolutely, that is true. But the goal is not to have 5 servings of gluten-free pasta in a day. The goal is to have 3 platefuls of vegetables in a day and occasionally have a gluten-free substitute food that you really enjoy. And so, you know, just begin the journey by ramping up the really great nutrition. And then we can continue to make further improvements to your diet as we go.
Doctor, I would like to ask you about oxalates, lectins do you think that in some cases it can be helpful if someone, because in my case, I had some problems with oxalates, and when I stopped to eat, for example, almonds, because I used to eat paleo diet, after that I switched to low carb, but I realized that, for example, in my case, some vegetables and some, especially nuts, and a lot of nuts, I used to eat a lot of nuts, and when I stopped and I transfer my diet mostly to carnivore, some vegetables, but not very often, and not very often some fruits, but only low carb. It helps me a lot. So what do you think? In some cases, it could be helpful to stop with oxalates, lectins, and other vegetable to reduce your inflammation and, for example, SIBO.
So what I want to point out to everyone is that if we think we originated in equatorial Africa and migrated into Europe, Asia, Australia, North and South America, we have many, many different ecosystems that humans thrive in. There are many, many different kinds of food patterns that we can thrive in. And if anyone says that there's only one food pattern that will work for everyone, is wrong, and quit following them. So if I ever say the paleo is the only diet that will work, stop following me, because that's wrong. And so, yes, the carnivore diet can be super helpful for some. A ketogenic diet can be super helpful for some. A Mediterranean diet can be helpful for some. And a well-constructed vegetarian or vegan diet can be helpful. What I want everyone who's listening is you pick one of these diets that speaks to you, that's where you start. And if you do great, you can start and stop with that diet pattern. But if you're like, okay, I am markedly better, but I still have some symptoms that are troublesome that I'd like to improve on. And so I'm going to continue to read and investigate, and I may explore some other dietary patterns to see if they could do a better job for these symptoms. And for people who have SIBO, a lower carb diet may do much better for them. And they may do better with the ketogenic diet, and they may do better with the carnivore diet. The carnivore diet and the low carb diet, again, because it's lower in carbs, can starve out the SIBO problems. What the plants have that can be super helpful is that the plants can activate my phase 1, phase 2 detox pathways and can provide some hormetic stress, much like the saunas and the cold plunges and strength training. So yes, there are advantages to plants higher in carbs. And maybe there is benefit to spending some time in a paleo diet, some time in a carnivore diet, and back to a paleo diet, and back to a low carb diet, and having more of a seasonal variation to how we eat. I certainly find that during the winter, I'm lower carb and more ketogenic than I am during the summer. I will eat my blueberries and blackberries and arroyo berries during the summer and fall. I don't eat nearly as much during the winter. So, and this is what our ancestors did. They had a very seasonal fluctuation to their diet. So as I think about my approach to my health and how I take care of my patients is I try to think, you know, how did early humans survive and thrive? And what could I do that could help my patients have their environment be a little closer to what our ancestral mothers and fathers were doing, and still get to enjoy, you know, the high-speed internet that lets you and me chat, but still gives my DNA some of the environments that my DNA expects. And then I try to read and experiment. And for anyone who's in the carnivore world, I have encouraged my carnivore colleagues, please write case reports and case series so we can know what patients are best for this, what are the labs that we should follow, what are the kinds of adverse events that we should monitor, so we would know how to use them in our clinical practice.
Okay, thank you very much for your effort. And I would like to ask about the situation now in United States, because I know that in history, I read about it because you mentioned about it, that when you start to improve on the diet, you would like to show other people that it is possible to make a diet change, which is very, very important in our lifestyle, in our health, and also in MS patient on the world. And I remember that you mentioned about it, that it was really, really super hard to convince this medical environment that it was really hard for you, that you wanted to show them, look at me, I was really, really ill, I was homebound, I was on a wheelchair, and I would like to show you that you should change your mindset. So it was changed after all of these years of your work, or it's really super hard to convince people that the diet it is possible to make some changes in your diet and get well?
You know, when I first started talking about this, I would go to schools, the organic grocery stores, places of worship. And the National MS Society local chapter wanted me to speak to them. I said, sure. I got interviewed by their clinical advisory committee, and they banned me as a speaker because they thought my message was dangerous. and that they were afraid people would refuse disease-modifying treatments in favor of diet. So I said, oh, fine, do what you think is right, and I'll keep speaking where I was invited. And I was doing my little clinical trials and getting papers published. And then, my TED Talk went viral. Then I got my book deal, and I had a best-selling book. And then the MS Society, because they monitor social media, saw that their constituents suddenly were talking all about diet, the Wahls Protocol, exercise, meditation, and they decided they needed to have a wellness conference. Got me there, and we had a vigorous debate. And I explained to them that if you're going to do this, you need to get different people to review the proposed research, because you've been funding animal model studies, and studying people is very different than studying mice. And so I can help you get registered dietitian, PhDs who can help you evaluate these studies. In the following year, they funded my study, which compared the Swank diet and the Wahls diet. And we have been going every year, the last 5 years, to the consortium of multiple sclerosis centers and presenting our research. This year, we had 5 studies that we presented. Mm-hmm. We did 3 oral presentations. There was a 3-hour symposium on diet and MS, the status of the research. And so we've made a lot of progress. And the thing that was super exciting was because this is where there are thousands and thousands of clinical people who take care of MS patients, people who do clinical research, like myself, and the PhDs who are talking about some of the animal model studies and the basic science studies, and MS as a disease of accelerated aging. They said, instead, in lecture after lecture, that we have to be telling patients that they need to improve their diet, they need to exercise, they need to address sleep and stress. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and let me tell you that this is the first year that I heard the basic scientists all saying, almost every one of them said, you really have to be talking about diet. And this year, we had our papers published by Neurology, one of the leading scientific journals that publish research about MS in that in that journal. So we're making headway. It's a 30-year journey to change the standard of care. We're 15 years into it. The young people are beginning to get told in their training that diet matters, that we need to be talking to people, yes, about their disease-modifying drug treatment, but we should be telling them that diet really does matter, and then sending them back to primary care to work on their diet, to work on their sleep and their exercise, send them to physical therapy. And now they said, we should send them to dietitians to work on their diet. There's more work. There's certainly more work to do. But definitely that was very exciting. So 15 years ago, I'm banned, I'm condemned. The neurology world hates me, hates my message. I'm a real thorn in their side.
I can imagine it. how hard was for you. Besides your personal story, that you were really unhealthy person, and then you are talking about how diet is important in your life, and you are bounded by the doctors.
And I'm attacked. Yeah. But I just felt morally obligated to tell people who wanted to hear that there was something you could do, and that there are some people who want to do it, who want to eat these radical things known as vegetables, who want to stop eating these terrible things known as junk food and processed foods, and that meat is okay, vegetables are good. And what was wild, so at this meeting I was at, people come up and say, "Are you Dr. Wahls?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And so they had a few questions, we had a little conversation, and then I said, "Would it be okay? Can I get a selfie with you? Because my patients would really like to know that you and I talked." I said, "Oh yeah, sure, of course." We're making progress. We are making progress.
Yeah, it's amazing, you know, because it was, I don't remember, but it was, I think 9 years ago when I was really sick, and I found your book in United States, and I always tell people that one of the reasons that I'm still living is that I know English, you know, and I also had a huge brain fog. And when I bought your book in English and I started to read it, it was really super hard for me to understand everything in English because I had a brain fog, you know. So
Yeah.
even in Polish language, I had a really problem to understand everybody and what is going on near me, you know. So when I
Translated into Polish yet?
Yes, it is. I have it. I have I have your book in Polish. So now a lot of people, both in Poland, this book, and I can say it's because of you, of course, because you write it, but because of me, because I try to show this book to everybody, you know, who suffer not only for not only because of MS, but I think that this book is really important to everybody because you can treat any other condition if you have neurological problems. I actually had a diagnosis with MS, but after that, after a couple of years, I started to looking for something else, and it was finally Lyme disease, and I thought that it is not possible to get rid of this this disease because it was really severe, you know. I had a lot of symptoms. I couldn't walk, I couldn't breathe normally, I couldn't eat almost anything, you know. And I thought that maybe if you were able to recover, so why not me, you know? I just thought, why, if you did this, I have to try, you know. So that's why at the beginning of the conversation I started to cry, because, you know, I remember when I bought this book in English, and now I have you today, and I'm just, it is amazing, you know what I mean? When you told me about your story and your kids, you know, my son told me, "Mom, what can I do to save your life?" And he was very small, and my daughter as well, and she doesn't understand anything, and she was he tried to help me, but he couldn't, you know. So I understand why you are crying, because, and I have a lot of patients who has a lot of problems with their health, and my goal is to show them that it is possible to recover, and we have hope.
We have hope. We have hope. Now, I saw someone said they want to translate this book into Ukrainian. I want you to know that I think there's a Ukrainian publisher that has bought the foreign rights, and I believe that is in process. So, Yana Luna, I think there will be one coming. And I want everyone to know, I see that I have another meeting I'm supposed to jump on.
Yes, I'm very sorry that I you know, prolonged this meeting, but I would like to
Let's let everyone know that I'm doing the MS and Neuroimmune Summit, and that Beth will get you the links for that, so you can post that on your Instagram file. Let everyone know. Do everyone sign up? It's free. It's online. So if you have your phone, your social media, your computer, you'll be able to watch and see more of these wonderful, inspiring interviews. There is so much we can do to slow, arrest the damage and lead to improving function, improving quality of life, whether you have MS or any of the other millions of other autoimmune conditions that also damage our brain, our cranial nerves, our spinal cord, and our peripheral nerves.
Yes, I already shared this link, but I'm going to do this once again. So, dear doctor, thank you very much. Thank you once again for your work, for your contribution. And I'm really, really honored that you decide to speak with me. So,
thank you.
Have a nice evening for everyone. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Much love
you.
in your family. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye-bye.